Shut up and sit down.
Welcome back to Nerd Safari. I'm Simon.
I'm Ellie.
And tonight we will be reviewing... This is going to be a spoiler-free review, so there will be no spoilers beyond what you've seen in the trailer, which honestly, there's a lot of spoilers in that trailer. I would also say that I kind of feel like we need to do this review almost in two halves, because you need a review for people who love the Mortal Kombat franchise, and you also need a review for people who have no clue about Mortal Kombat at all. Hey, you played the arcade games.
I did, but all I did was mash the buttons and steer the person at the other person, and so I don't know if that counts.
I think that counts. Sometimes those are the most skillful players.
That's how I've approached life. Just mash the buttons and walk in the right direction.
Yes. And for anyone who's been living under a rock for the last few decades, I'm sure we don't need to say it, but Mortal Kombat is a hugely successful video game franchise that really pushed the boundaries of violence and gore in video games. Before that, everything was very kind of cartoon looking. You didn't really see anyone get badly injured. Mortal Kombat comes in, and not only is there blood flowing after every punch, but at the end of every fight you have the opportunity to do a fatality and literally kill your opponent in some horrifying way. Now, the games actually created the modern-day video games rating system, at least here in the United States. It went right to the Supreme Court and created the M for mature rating. I've got to wonder how mature I was playing Mortal Kombat as a kid. But,
how mature are you now playing Mortal Kombat?
I feel like I've got less mature as my age has gone up. But it created that M for mature rating in large part. And the reason I'm going there is that I feel like this movie, being R-rated, really tells a more faithful Mortal Kombat story that fans of the video game franchise will love more than any other. So there have also been a bunch of Mortal Kombat movies over the years. Some good, some not so good. The most recent one we had was pretty dismal. It was Mortal Kombat Annihilation. And this movie was originally due to be a sequel to that. It was supposed to be released in the early 2000s, but it's been stuck in development hell for nearly 20 years.
So earlier we mentioned that this video game was groundbreaking in terms of the representation of gore, and ultra gore too, kind of like hyper, overly, nowhere near realistic levels of gore, and kind of creative methods of dispatching your enemies, and how that led to new rating systems for video games. And this movie definitely lives up to the spirit of that. We do see some really creative ways of dispatching people. It is definitely not one for young kids or anyone who is even vaguely squeamish. While the gore is very graphic, it is kind of done not quite tongue-in-cheek comedy, but it is, again, kind of, it's in that same tone of so ridiculous. It's not realistic gore. It's graphic, but it's very silly the way it's overly done. So not one for young kids, not one for squeamish people, or if you just kind of get a bit grossed out sometimes, because it is very graphic.
Kano wins.
However, there is fan service galore in this movie from the very start. And again, no spoilers, but you see somebody who has some kind of ice powers and is wearing a kind of a black and blue ninja suit fighting someone who has some kind of a blade on a stick. And I think for most of us who started playing Mortal Kombat way back when that very first game came out, Sub-Zero and Scorpion were the big characters that everybody wanted to be. Certainly if you go to a Comic-Con, you see more Sub-Zero and Scorpions walking around than you do anybody else. And that's probably not going to change after this movie, because they play a big part in the storyline.
I do feel like we're going to see a big boom in people cosplaying characters who have masks on.
Ah, yes.
And we do have that in spades in this movie, so I think the timing for this could be good. Look into, word to the wise, look into cosplays where people wear masks. We're going to see that a lot.
That's a great idea, yeah. I hadn't even thought about the number of characters in Mortal Kombat who do wear masks.
Or do what I plan to do and have a mask that is just themed to your outfit, not necessarily inherent in the original character, but kind of in line, in like the tone of your outfit can go with your mask.
Wow, pro tip. So I talked about Sub-Zero and Scorpion. Obviously, they're going to be in the movie, but you've also got Raiden, you've got Jax, you've got Goro, you've got Sonya Blade, you've got Kano, who is my favorite of the bunch, just somehow lovable and dislikable, and just despicable at the same time. I don't know how you manage it, but man, he was great in this movie.
You fucking beauty.
So many of the characters that you loved in the video games are really brought to life in this movie in a really faithful way. So in terms of fan service, you are good. The one question I have, though, is there a point where you can have too much fan service? And like, I've heard complaints about different TV shows that, you know, just jump the shark by giving the audience everything they want. And there were times where I was thinking, oh, I do wish this character would do this, and that happened immediately in the movie. So either they're mind readers, or maybe they've just gone a little bit too far in just giving the fans everything that they wanted to see in a Mortal Kombat movie. But I'll leave it up to you as to whether you think that's a good or a bad thing. So the movie really just sets up the fights. Like, there's a storyline running through it. It's okay. They kind of poke their own fun at how silly the storyline is.
Mortal Kombat spelt wrong.
But the fights are what really set this movie apart. And what I loved is it focuses on the martial arts. It especially focuses on weapons-based martial arts. And they feel like real martial arts as well. These people know what they're doing. But it also includes the kind of special moves that you want from an arcade beat-em-up game. So there are fireballs and venom and lasers shooting out of eyes. There's a lot of really cool special moves in there as well to really please the hardcore martial arts nerds like me, but also the video games nerds like me.
Known.
I also really liked the sets as well, because they were set up, and when they were having the fights, like quite often in movies and TV, you have fights that kind of go all over the place. Like you have people like running through stuff, and especially I'm always thinking of shipping container parks as well. Like there's always people climbing up and down shipping containers, and so there's a lot of movement. Whereas with the way they set these up, it was quite often you almost had the set kind of framed the action in the middle, and they tended to stay in one spot. The ground was flat, and it was visually clearly a tribute back to the video game. So you had like, it was almost framed. They were just fighting in that one spot. Like there was obviously like rolling and pushing and falling, but it was generally just kind of like in that one spot. And I thought that was really clever way to again call back to the original game.
Yeah, I agree. There were some backdrops and fight arenas that were recreated so faithfully to ones that we've seen in the video game over the last 30 years that it really, really took me back. It was so immersive. I will say, though, if I had one criticism of this movie, it's the way the story is structured. There's so much time given to the fighters finding each other and training and then having their first kind of round of battles. And it feels like a ton of build-up, and then the end is, it's okay. There's one great battle between two leading characters at the end, which kind of salvages it. But it did feel at times like they were trying to build up a Mortal Kombat universe to create a series of movies, more than they were trying to create a satisfying ending at the end of this one. So there were definitely points when it's a long movie. You know, you're talking about 110 plus minutes. And it doesn't need to be. Like, you know, you're really just there focused on probably a half hour of fights. The rest is just travel and talking, and it can get a little bit tiresome in between. So I wonder if they'll actually do like a director's cut edit or something of this to maybe just tighten that up a little bit.
Although director's cuts are usually longer.
Yeah, if recent examples have been anything to go by.
No names.
So as you can tell, as a fan of the Mortal Kombat games, I had a really good time watching this. However, how do you think you would feel if you had never played a Mortal Kombat game, didn't know any of the characters at all?
I think if you're coming into this cold, not knowing anything, it's still a really fun action movie. Like it's over the top, it's cartoonish, but it still has enough of an edge that you're not feeling patronized. It's definitely not for kids. So I feel like if you're the kind of person who isn't necessarily familiar with that franchise, it's just a fun movie. And that's not to be undersold either. Like it's really entertaining. And yes, it's cheesy, but some of our favorite movies are just cheesy nonsense where you can predict the whole thing beginning to end, but you just enjoy the journey. And this is definitely like that. Incredibly stylish. There is so much to enjoy about this. The costumes are really good, and just the special effects, the makeup that they've done, the whole thing is just really solid.
Yeah, I would agree. And there is humor in there. There is actually some pretty decent acting buried in a Mortal Kombat movie, which who'd have thunk it? And there are times that are genuinely thought-provoking / pulling on your heartstrings just a little bit, enough to just kind of take this out of the bargain basement action movie pile and maybe just raise it up a notch. And clearly it's doing okay at the box office. So yeah, I think the world seems to have a soft spot for Mortal Kombat. Or maybe we all just need a little bit of silliness in this day and age.
Definitely.
Maybe we're just glad for that. Well, anyway, there you go, friends. That is what we think. It's a fun action romp. Maybe you'll be a little bit bored of the storyline if you've never played a Mortal Kombat game before. But other than that, give it a shot. It's definitely worth a couple of hours of your time. Well, thanks for checking out our review of Mortal Kombat. We're back every day checking out some other craziness on the Nerd Safari.
Peace out, nerds.
Bye.
Shut up and sit down.